Good morning. I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for attending, for traveling all this way. Some of you maybe have traveled across town, but I know many of you have traveled as far as Juneau and Anchorage and all points west, so we really do sincerely appreciate the fact that you did so. My name is Tracy LeBeau. I'm the recently appointed director of the new Office of Indian Energy at Department of Energy. And before we get too much into the program here, we did want to, being that this is a tribal event, it's a DOE event, but it's also a tribal event, that we wanted to take this opportunity to have an opening prayer. Chief Red Eagle from the Osage Nation is going to, we're fortunate that he's going to do that for us. So Chief Red Eagle, thank you.
If everyone will join with me as we come this morning for this event, the first time event that has occurred. I want to thank the Department of Energy for inviting us here and asking me to return thanks for our meeting today. So, Shaji Wibrat Seha Wakanda Ijinki. Humpa they washtope who they. Nika she's Utsi North America Alaska Native Dak Awadapi Combra Datsi Wakanda. What that's Etsie Hako Washkonsta El Kudaha. Ni sape there energy, renewable energy Jowali da into they ha ink she there. Ipaho Maji Jaji Wibrat Seho Wakanda Ijinki. Humpa they washtope who they Nikashi Jutsi there. Many tribes are the Ewadapi Combra in Datsi Wakanda. Unco they ha into they ha ink she. Unco they ha in Datsi Wakanda. Iagake Dadi Wadak Kishe. Dak Ewadapi Combra in Datsi Wakanda. Jaji Wibrat Seha Wakanda Ijinki. Nikashi Jutsi there. You look down upon us, Father. Jaji Wibrat Seha, as we call upon you this day, Father. Jaji Wibrat Seha Anko the daha into deha inkshe. Ia gake dadi wada kishe. Ia gake dadi. Ia gashena Wakanda Jinki. You bless us this day, Father. Wakanda Okia as he leads us, Lord. Jaji Wibrat Seha Wakanda Jinki. Ia gashena Wakanda. Jaji Wakanda Jinki. Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. Again, good morning, everyone. What we'd like to do this morning, in kind of a lot of our discussions across the country over the last couple of months, we've noticed that there are parts of Indian country that's very familiar with the Department of Energy, with certain of our programs, and less familiar with others of our programs. Some of you are more familiar and have more day-to-day interaction with our environmental programs. Some of you have more day-to-day interaction with our renewable programs. That being the case, one of the things before we started the roundtables today, we wanted to welcome everybody from the Department of Energy, have some official welcoming, but we also wanted to provide a little bit of overview about the department for the entire department for those of you who are less familiar with the various programs there. So in doing that, we've asked Dr. Arun Majumdar. He's the RPE director, and he's senior advisor to the secretary. Arun first became the director of DOE's Advanced Research Projects Agency, Energy, the RPE program, our country's only agency devoted to transformational energy research and development, which was established in October 2009. Prior to joining RPE, Dr. Majumdar was the Associate Lab Director for Energy and Environment at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, and a Professor of Mechanical Engineering and Materials Science and Engineering at the University of California, Berkeley. His highly distinguished research career includes the science and engineering of energy conversion, transport, and storage, ranging from molecular and nanoscale level to large energy systems. In 2005, he was elected a member of the National Academy of Engineering for his pioneering work. He's been with the department for many years. I know he's a very trusted and important advisor to the secretary. And with that, we're going to help me welcome Dr. Majumdar.
Good morning. Well, thank you all for coming here. I know the secretary is going to chat with you, I believe, tomorrow. I just want to offer my own welcome to you. We dialed in the weather for you in Washington, and so, enjoy the rain, and I hope you really, seriously, I hope you really enjoy the time out here. Let me just say a few words. I know that, Tracy, Pilar, and others and their team have worked really hard. They started this office only this January, and you've gone around the nation talking to all the stakeholders, and that has have all come together in this meeting out here. And I think, first of all, let me just congratulate Tracy, Pilar, and your team for getting the whole thing going and into this meeting today. So you ought to be congratulated for all the hard work that you've shown. But this is a very important meeting for us. As you know, and as Tracy and Pilar and their team have gone around, we're here to listen. And we're here to listen about your issues, and we're really here to serve you. And it's really important that you tell us what your needs are. But I also want to give you a brief overview of what the department is all about. And you're going to hear more details from the secretary, but just want to give you a teaser, if you may, today. The department has three basic functions. If you look at the mission statement of the department, I'll just read it out to you. To ensure America's peace and prosperity by addressing its energy, environmental, and nuclear security challenges through transformative science and technology solutions. That's very broad, and I won't go into the details. But if you look at the department, if I look at the department, there are sort of three basic elements. We are the biggest we bear the biggest burden of supporting science in this country. We are the biggest funder of basic science in this country. And that is a huge burden, I would say. It's a huge responsibility because if you look around the world, we are the premier science organization. We cannot be complacent about it, but we have the best science and engineering infrastructure in the world, and we need to maintain that. So that is one big function. The other function is about our nuclear security and and also our legacy of nuclear waste. And you're going to hear from Neil later on today, right after me, about the nuclear side of things. And the third one, which is very important, where I am involved in, is about a clean energy future. And let me spend just a couple of minutes on what I mean by clean energy future. When we traveled today this morning, you probably came in a metro or a car or some other forms of transportation. We use energy out there. The lights that we are, have lit up is due to energy. Everything we do, our whole economy is based on some form of energy. And we sort of take it for granted. And I believe that's a mistake because none of these things can be taken for granted. And let me just step back for a moment, and let me just, if you just step back from your current world that we are living in right now, and if you were to just go into space for a moment and look down on the world and see where we are going, I think you'll see a problem. The challenge is the following. The population today in the world is about 6.5 billion people, and that is growing. Today, in fact, yesterday, there was a report that came out from the United Nations. By the end of this century, we'll have about 10.5 to 11 billion people. So the number of people are increasing. And as the number of people are increasing, their prosperity is also increasing. That's a good thing. But along with prosperity and the population, the energy use, consumption is going to increase. So this world is becoming bigger and bigger in terms of people and the consumption. And we don't see an end to this right now. So how do we feed this world? Well, we have our resources, whether it's petroleum, whether it's other things, and we are consuming our resources right now. But many of those resources are constrained. We have some finite. This earth is finite. Even though the population is going up, the earth is finite. And those resources are constrained. But as we use that energy, we have some waste, whether it's carbon dioxide, whether it's other stuff, other waste. And frankly, that is also constrained. We cannot just infinitely create the waste, because that is going to come back and bite us. So here's the world is growing. To feed this world, for the prosperity of this world, we need resources, energy resources, and material resources. That is constrained, and the output of this is constrained. And this one-way flow, frankly, in the long term is unsustainable. And whoever figures out how to make a sustainable economy in this growing world will win the future. And no one has figured this out yet. And that is where science, engineering, we have to put our minds at work to figure out how to do this in a sustainable way, so that in a cost-effective way to do it. And now, energy efficiency and renewable energy are absolutely critical for this. Because if you really want to make it sustainable, with the constraints on both sides and this growing world and population, the only way to do it sustainably in the long term is using the renewables. And to use the renewables in the best possible way, in the smartest way, frankly, is to do it efficiently. So this is all the same, if you may. So, for example, why don't we just do it today? Well, if you look at the amount of power that we need in the world, it's on the order of about 10 terawatts of power. What does that really mean? Well, if you were to produce that power from sunlight, which is a renewable resource, we seem to have a lot of it. Maybe not today in Washington, but we seem to have a lot of it. So if you were to do that, if you do the numbers, it turns out if you just cover the island of Sicily, I hope there are no Sicilians out here. If you just cover the island of Sicily with the solar cells today, you would produce 10 terawatts. You can feed the world, provide the energy for the world. Why didn't we do that? Well, it's just not cost effective. It is just too expensive to do that, and there are other forms of energy which are cheaper. So here's an example where science and engineering can play a role, is to bring down the cost of solar electricity and to enable to use it for the rest of the world at a cost that is cheaper than fossil fuel-based one. Because if you could do that, you will have changed the world. So that's the kind of thing where science and engineering is, that Department of Energy is looking into. How do we make, in the long term, how do we transition to an economy which is sustainable and which will provide economic growth in a cost-effective way? And that is a very, very difficult challenge. And if you look back in the history of America, and there's a lot of history of the United States out here, we have always worked hard to make sure that our children and grandchildren have a better life than what we have had. And frankly, that cannot be taken for granted today. Because we are in a competitive world. We are seeing this unsustainable way of doing this in the long term. And if we are to really make the world better for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, that's where our generation has to really put our minds together to figure out how to do this in a sustainable way so that we can close this loop and make sure that our children and grandchildren have the right kind of resources so that they can leave the right kind of world for them in the future. That's what, in the clean energy, that's why we are focusing on the clean energy future And as the president said, this is the future. The future is up for grabs. And if we have to win the future, we've got to put our minds behind it. And that's what we're trying to do. And I really hope, and we need your help as well. This is not to be done only in Washington, D.C. by the bureaucrats like me. We need all the resources in this country, not only the science and engineering, but you all, where you have the land to be able to do this, to be able to deploy this, and bring your resources. I know the Department of Energy is working very closely with you. But you got to do more. We have to do more to provide this future for our children and grandchildren. So I thank you for coming here. I know you're going to discuss a lot of things. I just wanted to give you the philosophy of why we're doing what we're trying to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And next, we're going to hear from Neil Miller. Neil is a Principal Deputy Administrator for the National Nuclear Security Administration. She was sworn in August of 2010. As the second highest ranking official, she is the NNSA's Chief Operating Officer and is responsible for integrating strategic and tactical planning, programming, budgeting, acquisitions, business management, leadership development, infrastructure management, information technology, and just about everything else across the NNSA nuclear security enterprise. Previously, Neil worked for the Congressional Research Service, working on nuclear non-proliferation issues, and she was also previously worked at the White House Office of Management and Budget. She's going to talk to us today about our nuclear programs and the work that we do in that sphere. So please welcome Neil Miller.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, and good morning. And I want to tell you just how delighted I am to have an opportunity to speak to you this morning. When I hear someone talk about my position with the National Nuclear Security Administration, I think to myself, the people in this room, many of you know the work that we do goes back a lot longer than the name NNSA. NNSA last spring celebrated its 10th anniversary as an organization, but as many of the people in this room know, what we do is really the DNA of the Department of Energy. And pretty much from the very first steps we took to what led to the programs we operate today, we have been in partnership with the peoples who live in and around the lands where we do our work. And so this is a long partnership. It is, as many partnerships go, it has had its ups and downs. I think, without question, we are in a wonderful era now of commitment and close working relationships, government-to-government working relationships, and we are looking forward to demonstrating to you just how strong we can make each other in working together. NNSA, primarily through its national laboratories and the Nevada National Security Site, as I said, has a long history of collaboration with tribal governments in addressing national security matters and nuclear and energy security matters. The missions of the NNSA are urgent and vital. We are responsible for maintaining the nation's nuclear deterrent. We are responsible for securing dangerous nuclear material around the world and detecting its illicit use. We are responsible for powering the nuclear navy. And in all of those missions, I think there are probably representatives in this room who are affiliated, associated with, and have a long history of working with us to make sure those missions are possible. Our relationship with the tribes, I'm delighted to say, continues to thrive and grow as we do collaborate on mutual goals, including as stewards of the land that we work on, that we live on, as neighbors providing technical assistance through educational opportunities, and as business partners. Each of the NNSA laboratories has a tribal affairs point of contact, whose goal is to ensure compliance with applicable policies and requirements that guide our relationships with tribal governments, including consultation, program development outreach, and support for projects as subject matter experts. Let me talk a little bit about each of those areas. As stewards of the land, NNSA's interaction with tribes occurs primarily at the site level and is aligned with NNSA's mission and site stewardship function, including decision-making processes such as NEPA. We know from our past that attention to the land has to come first and foremost in what we do. If we don't take care of it, it won't be there for us. We have a historical commitment to it. And I can tell you that it's a commitment that we renew all of the time in NNSA. As neighbors providing technical assistance, Tom D'Agostino, the NNSA administrator, recently signed out a memorandum to all of NNSA that provides visibility to and highlights our model for partnering across multiple sites to solve difficult science, technology, and engineering problems that affect our tribal partners. We are extremely fortunate in NNSA and, in fact, in all of DOE to have as our backbone our national laboratories. And the amazing thing about the national laboratories, since their creation and since, in fact, the Manhattan Project, where many of the people who worked on that came from or eventually went to what became national laboratories, are all of the problems that have been solved that had nothing to do with national security, but definitely made the world and certainly our homes a better place. Through educational opportunities, NNSA invests in science, technology, engineering, and math education through student scholarships, education grants, workforce training, and professional development in quality education processes. And as business partners, DOE and NNSA make it possible for tribal businesses and members of tribes to actively and successfully compete to provide goods and services. We know this is an area we can and must expand upon. We need everybody's help. We need the input. We are working in times of fiscal restraint. And to that end, and because we know we have to do a better job at how we do our business, not just what we do with our business, we're looking to further the partnerships we have with all of you. So what do we see as the next steps? Well, first of all, give us your toughest science, technology, and engineering problems to solve. We have people who are looking to solve them. NNSA is open to discussion and recommendations on how to improve our interaction with the tribes. I know, again, because in the bit of the introduction, I realized when you mentioned my work with the Congressional Research Service was actually at the very beginning of my career about 100 years ago. And in between, I have been involved with the Department of Energy both from inside and outside. When I worked at the White House, the Office of Management and Budget, in the 8 years I lived in Albuquerque working as a support contractor to the Albuquerque site. I know that the relationships with the people where we do our work are the thing that counts the most for us. So we are looking to you to help feed into what we need to be doing and how we need to be doing it better. We look forward, as I said before, to continuing our government-to-government relationships with you and advancing our mutual goals. And on behalf of Tom D'Agostino, the administrator of the NNSA, and there are a number of NNSA people here today, I thank you for inviting me here this morning.
Thank you, Neil. I'm really happy both were able to join us this morning. I think one of the things we wanted to do this morning was just give you a little better sense of, if you weren't familiar with some of our programs, to familiarize yourself a little bit more, and so you can start thinking about Indian country's relationship to the department maybe a little bit differently going forward. We have so many opportunities, so many things that we're involved in beyond just what you might be familiar with, and so I think this is going to be hopefully a very interesting few days for you as you learn more about our programs and our leadership and have that interaction, and we look forward to hearing from you. So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and transition us as quickly as I can to the roundtables, which are coming next. So I want to explain a little bit about how we the kind of questions we were asking during the registration process that many of you went through. And one of the reasons why we had this day before event was very early on from Indian country. We heard very often from tribes that, boy, we're going to come a long way. We'd love to have some more time with the departmental leadership than just the summit day. And so we decided early on to have this day before event. And this is really more directed towards having that government-to-government relation discussions between tribal leadership, elected tribal leaders, and our DOE leadership. And so we have established, and you've probably got it all in your packets, that we're having 5 different roundtables. 4 of them will be focused around very specific subject areas. So I think most of you have probably decided where you're going to go by now. The one thing that we did do just recently is decided to have a 5th roundtable that is just very open to, because we had a lot of tribal organizations, a lot of tribal NGOs, and non-tribal folks that wanted to participate today. And so we decided to have a 5th roundtable that's going to be open to anybody that will be hosted by the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit about that background. We're going to ask that, so this room is actually going to be the Energy Efficiency Renewable Energy Roundtable. And so when you go into your different roundtables, I just wanted to give you a little bit about that background so you understand that I think the facilitators who we're going to use are going to ask that perhaps we have the tribal leaders seated at the table and the tribal organization support staff in the perimeter. One thing also I wanted to let you know that we have the Udall Foundation here assisting us. So in each roundtable, we're going to have facilitators that is going to be helping guide the discussions for the 2 hours, and we're also going to be tracking the discussions and taking down the comments. So we're going to be, and at the end of this, we're hoping to summarize all of our previous roundtables, everything today, our summit day, and report that out and share that with you. So last but not least, go ahead. Okay. Last but not least, we do want to let you know, and it's probably in your packets on the agenda, that after we're done with our roundtables, we're going to ask that we all kind of make sure that we're done a little bit before noon, and welcome you back in this room. And Secretary Vilsack was able to set aside some time today to address the audience. So he's going to be here at noon to speak for 20 or 25 minutes. And so we invite you to come back, and we'll have some closing remarks at that time. So with that, I'm just going to thank you all again, and we'll see you in the roundtables.